The psychology of Elon Musk is not the psychology of a man, it is the psychology of a force. A human being wrapped around a collision of obsessions, fears, ambitions, childhood wounds, improbable calculations, and a kind of stubbornness that borders on myth. To understand him, you don't start with the companies. The companies are merely symptoms. You start with the engine that powers them, the mind that refuses to sit still, refuses to accept the world as it is, refuses to obey the quiet limits most people are raised to believe in. His psychology is the psychology of someone who has always carried an inner atmosphere different from those around him, someone whose internal world never matched external expectations, so he kept trying to build the outer world in a way that could finally harmonize with what he felt inside. A person like Musk does not learn the world, he interrogates it. He does not ask, "What can I do?" He asks, "What can existence itself allow?" And then he pushes that boundary until something breaks. Sometimes the boundary, sometimes himself, sometimes the people standing too close. Because minds like his do not operate on normal emotional gradients. They swing on a spectrum between cold logic and volcanic intuition. There is little middle ground. He can be astonishingly empathetic in his vision for humanity, yet strikingly indifferent to individuals in front of him. That paradox is not accidental, it is structural. The same circuitry that allows him to think in terms of the survival of the species also makes it difficult for him to slow down enough to notice the bruises left by his pace. To understand his psychology, you must first understand the experience of being a child, whose mind races far ahead of his body. Imagine being small and fragile in a world that feels too loud, too chaotic, too insistently normal. Imagine having thoughts that come in like storms, too fast to explain, too unconventional to be welcomed, too overwhelming to ignore. You don't learn to share them, you learn to contain them. You don't learn to connect, you learn to observe. You develop an interior life so active and vivid that the outer world becomes merely a staging ground for the visions that flash behind your eyes. That is where his psychology begins. The boy who lived in imagination more than in the room, who solved pain by thinking instead of feeling, who hid in ideas because ideas were safer than people. This creates a dangerous gift, hyper-independence. Once you learn to survive inside your mind, the outside world becomes optional. Relationships become optional. Rest becomes optional. You begin to believe that thinking is the cure to everything. Hurt? Think. Fear? Think. Lonely? Think. Overwhelmed? Think. And bit by bit, thinking becomes not a tool, but a shield. One that works beautifully, but isolates brutally. This is how you become the kind of adult who dreams at a planetary scale, but struggles with interpersonal softness. The kind who can design rockets, but cannot always decode emotions. The kind who can build systems that change the world, but sometimes breaks the hearts of the people trying to keep up with him. Then there is the wound, the quiet, deep, long-lasting wound, the one that formed from childhood scars and never really healed. Every person of great ambition has one, a psychological crack that turned into a tunnel. For Musk, the wound is tied to inadequacy and powerlessness, the wound of being underestimated, the wound of being hurt, the wound of being told explicitly or implicitly that he was too strange, too intense, too different. And when a highly intelligent child is wounded deeply enough, two paths open, collapse or domination. He did not collapse. He turned the wound into fuel, and the world became the proving ground. He taught himself that if he could do the impossible, the world would have to stop ignoring him. If he could push humanity forward, he could outrun the pain that tried to pin him down. If he could make himself bigger than the things that hurt him, the hurt would have nowhere left to sit. But childhood wounds do not vanish simply because you conquer industries. They mutate. They reappear inside the pressure to achieve. They show up in the fear of slowing down. They manifest in the belief that if you stop moving, the ghosts will catch you. The psychology of Elon Musk is the psychology of a man who has never stopped running, not away from ambition, but away from stillness. Stillness means feeling. Stillness means memory. Stillness means the voices from long ago can finally be heard. So he moves, he builds, he disrupts, he accelerates. Not only because he wants to push the world forward, but because motion itself has become a form of self-protection. And yet, he is not driven only by fear. He is driven equally by obsession, a specific kind of obsession that does not burn outward, but burns through him. It is the obsession of someone who does not merely want to change the world, but feels personally responsible for saving it. This is why he gravitates toward existential problems, sustainable energy, multiplanetary survival, AI alignment, transportation innovation. These are not the projects of a capitalist. These are the projects of someone who sees the fragility of the human species and refuses to accept that fragility as fate. This is not normal ambition. This is apocalyptic imagination fused with engineering logic. Most people avoid thinking about the end of the world. He plans for it. Most people fear extinction. He strategizes around it. Most people think short-term. He thinks in the timescale of civilizations. This long-range thinking shapes his emotional architecture. It makes small talk irrelevant. It makes conventional success boring. It makes typical achievements feel microscopic. When your brain is oriented towards centuries, daily comforts become distractions. When you are thinking about Mars, the stock market becomes noise. When you are calculating survival probabilities, interpersonal politics feel tiny. This does not mean he lacks emotion. It means his emotions are tied to long arcs of meaning, not momentary social feedback. Where others experience ambition as career progression, he experiences it as mission. Where others feel pride from recognition, he feels it from impact. Where others burn out from pressure, he burns from within, fueled by a vision that refuses to let him rest. However, this psychological structure comes with a heavy shadow. When you live in a mental universe so large, the human world feels painfully small. People feel slow. Systems feel inefficient. Emotions feel unpredictable. Many geniuses struggle with this imbalance, the tension between the vastness of their mind and the limits of the environment. But Musk carries this tension at an extreme frequency. He expects from others the speed, intensity, and clarity that comes naturally to him. He becomes frustrated when people cannot keep up. He becomes impatient when progress lags. He becomes blunt when problems persist. His communication can feel harsh because his mind is sprinting while others are still stretching. This is not malice, it is mismatch. A mismatch between the pace of his internal world and the pace of the external one. There is also the psychology of risk, not reckless, but calculated with a precision that looks like madness from the outside. Musk takes risks most people would never consider because he evaluates consequences on a different scale. Where an ordinary entrepreneur sees danger, he sees probability distributions. Where others see failure, he sees iteration. Where others see chaos, he sees potential. This is why he can bet his entire net worth on rockets without blinking. Why he can invest in ideas that seem absurd. Why he can tear down and rebuild without sentimental resistance. When your mind is trained to model reality mathematically, fear becomes a variable, not a barrier. But perhaps the most defining trait in his psychology is emotional friction, the constant clash between the engineer brain and the human heart. He is a deeply sensitive person who learned to shield that sensitivity with logic so sharp it sometimes cuts the people closest to him. He cares about humanity abstractly, passionately, intensely, but struggles with caretaking individuals in front of him emotionally. It is the paradox of the visionary, the ability to love the world while forgetting sometimes to soften toward individuals. A person who dreams of saving planets but sometimes forgets to manage moments. A person whose empathy is wide but not always near. The psychology of Elon Musk is also the psychology of loneliness, not loneliness from lack of people, but loneliness from lack of equals. He lives at an altitude of thinking that few people can sustain. And altitude is cold. The higher you think, the thinner the air gets. The thinner the air, the fewer the people who can breathe alongside you. This creates an isolation that no success can fill. An isolation that whispers to him, even in crowded rooms. An isolation that has followed him from childhood. The isolation of the misunderstood mind. When people idolize him, the gap widens. When people attack him, the gap widens. When people fail to understand him, the gap becomes a canyon. And so he works. Because work, at least, is a place where he feels understood by the logic of problems and the beauty of solutions. Then there is the psychology of control, not superiority, but stability. For someone whose childhood contained instability, control becomes not dominance, but safety. This is why he takes charge so intensely, why he micromanages, why he pushes standards beyond reason. Control is not about power. It is about preventing chaos. It is about shaping his environment to match the order his mind needs to function. And when control is tied to safety, any threat to it is experienced as danger. This is why he reacts strongly to criticism, why he moves decisively when things go wrong, why he refuses to allow half measures. His inner world is too loud for outer world chaos. Control is how he breathes. Finally, his psychology is built on meaning, deep, existential, cosmic meaning. He is not motivated by comfort, validation, or luxury. He is motivated by timeline, by legacy, by the question of what humanity will become centuries from now. Musk thinks in arcs that outlive him. He is psychologically anchored not in the present, but in the possible future. That is why he endures pressure that would break most people. Why he continues even when exhausted. Why he sacrifices personal peace for universal possibility. Once meaning becomes your oxygen, you no longer chase happiness. You chase destiny. This is the mind of Elon Musk, part brilliance, part wound, part chaos, part clarity, part fear, part vision. He is not simple. He is not one thing. He is not merely ambitious. He is constructing a psychological survival mechanism through achievement. He is not merely innovative. He is translating inner storms into outer revolutions. He is not merely disruptive. He is refusing to accept the limits imposed on him by childhood pain, adult expectations, or the inertia of civilizations. To understand him is to understand the rare human who does not live life, he engineers it. He does not adapt to the world, he reshapes it. He does not dream, he operationalizes dreams like blueprints. And somewhere inside all of that metal, all of that logic, all of that vision, there is still the boy who wanted to escape pain by thinking his way into a better universe. Perhaps this, all of this, is simply the adult version of that escape. A mind trying to build a world so vast, so advanced, so resilient, that no child in it will ever feel as alone as he once did.